when I walk by the ocean, because I'm very lucky, I live close to the ocean. I'm here in San Francisco. I have access to the beautiful Pacific Ocean. And when I walk there, I feel again that same sense that I felt in Africa, which is that I'm very small. The ocean is very large and vast and mysterious and compelling. And you can just continue to let yourself be part of that, and you can feel like your nervous system calms down and gets quieter and gets more peaceful, and the whole thing, it's like it's immediate for me when I go by the ocean. It happens, and I remember that happening in Africa, just looking at that vast landscape.
Welcome to the Gratitude Podcast on www.georgianbenta.com, where you'll hear a new story each week that will inspire more gratitude in your own life. Our mission is to inspire 100,000 people to discover how to feel gratitude and live a happy life through the amazing life stories of our successful guests and their actionable tips. And now, the host of our podcast, Georgian Benta.
Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Today with us, we have a world traveler. She has been throughout the world since the age of 11. And she has been to places like Europe, India, Cambodia, Bhutan, Japan, Kenya, China, Burma, Vietnam, Thailand, Cuba, and many other places in the world. And she has so many interesting stories to share with us. Of course, many of them relating to gratitude. And of course, she's also an author, and she has put her experiences into written word, and she's actually an award-winning author of the book Bowing to Elephants, Tales of a Travel Junkie. Her name is Meg Dimond, and she's here with us, and I'm very, very excited. Hi, Meg.
Hi there.
So let us know a little bit more about you, about your background, your story. It's pretty exciting to have been traveling so much. It's a dream for many of us to be world travelers. How was your experience with this?
Well, it all started when I was about 11, and my mother decided. My mother was a very sort of independent and sort of a romantic person, and she decided she wanted to go live in Italy. And so she had just remarried, so she was married for the second time. My father was gone, and she wanted to go live in Italy. And she was an artist herself, so the idea of living in Italy, it meant that she could be close to art and beautiful things. And so that's where she decided she wanted to go. And so that's where we went. And we lived there for 3 years. And I went to both an American school and an international school. But all the friends that we made when we lived there for those 3 years were Italians. So I became bilingual in those 3 years, and I fell in love with the country. I felt so lucky to have that opportunity, and so excited. And I wrote back to my friends in America, and I went on and on about it. And I kept a journal. I kept a diary, and I wrote in it all the time about my experiences. And that's essentially the beginning of the telling of my story. It never stopped. I never discontinued the journal. I always wrote in it as I got older, many more journals later. So when we came back, I finished high school and I went off to college and that sort of thing. And I got married very young, but I still wanted to travel. And so I talked my husband into traveling, and we went to Europe, and we went to Mexico and that sort of thing. And then my life went on, and I just kept thinking about things I wanted to know in the rest of the world. And when I divorced my husband and had a new relationship, I spent a lot of that time planning trips, and that's where some of the more exotic trips happened, like to India and to Africa. And Africa was very, very important to me. And Europe and South America and all the rest of it. I didn't have to work for a living. I was very fortunate to have an inherited income. So I had a lot of freedom to move around, and I had ways that I could get my two children taken care of. So sometimes I took my children on trips, but often I left them with friends, and I just went off to discover things about the world. I think because I never felt that being in a foreign country was anything that was intimidating or confusing. It was more something that I wanted to experience and wanted to kind of connect with people of different cultures. So it became sort of the ruling vision of my life. I also I went back to college and I became a college teacher. I taught writing and literature, but it was the traveling, it was the finding out new things that was really important to me. Having that freedom and the inspiration that came from making friends with somebody in India or in Africa, for that matter. I was always a child. As a child, I was always somebody that wanted to learn things. I always wanted answers to questions. And I drove my mother kind of crazy because she didn't want to answer. There's a lot of things she didn't want to answer. And then there's things that she didn't know how to answer. So it was like, I just had this insatiable need to understand things. I was an only child, so I had no sisters or brothers, and I was lonely. So I was only, and I was lonely because my mother didn't pay much attention to me. And but I read a lot, and my reading and my studying that I did in school kind of was like fuel for me to think about traveling and going different places. Mm-hmm. So it all came out of that curiosity that I had as a really young person. And the curiosity is still there, and I'm 74. So wow. It's a great quality to own up to say that you're a really curious human being. It's good for one to be curious.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that, and I think one of the things that keep us healthy, especially mentally, and that keep us young is this curiosity, is that attitude that there are still things to discover, things to learn, and that makes you excited about what's next and what you can still find out. And on this idea, what are some of the things that you found out about the world or in the world that surprised you in your trips?
Well, I was very surprised when I got to Africa. I'll just take that as a starter. That even though I was surrounded by people whose skin was dark, I never felt different from them. That I recognized that our customs were different. Our traditions were different. We in America don't have the kind of ceremonies and sort of love of nature that they do in Africa, but there was a feeling of just of ease, of just being with just human beings. and they were very dark skinned and I was very white skinned. And so that was kind of astonishing. When I went to India, I was astonished at the humanity that I discovered, the generosity of spirit, and the warmth and the kind of sense of being invited in, despite the fact of the dire poverty and the deprivation in India. So, in other words, you can be generous even when you're as poor as dirt, when you don't have anything. And so there's a level of sort of spiritual understanding in India, I believe, or a sense of the embracing of all humanity that means it doesn't, again, there's no relationship to your economic well-being. It's there in the culture. And that was very moving to me to see that. So those are two things. I was interested when I went to Cuba. I haven't written about Cuba in the book, but when I went to Cuba, again, the curiosity that the Cubans have about Americans. Excuse me. They've been shut off from exposure to the United States over many decades, but they have this warm sort of sense of wanting to reach out and curiosity. And perhaps that's natural because they don't know much about us, and what their government tells them about us is propaganda and not very often true. So there was an interesting dynamic there of this sort of friendliness and like I say, curiosity again.
Beautiful. I want to get in a little bit deeper into what you said about the people from Africa, their love of nature. I think it's something that has to do with gratitude, the fact that they appreciate all of the things that nature gives them. And I felt the same way when I was in Bali. I felt the same kind of appreciation, that they had this same kind of appreciation and love for nature and for its generosity. And I wanted to ask you, did you feel that gratitude for life in general in Africa?
Well, Africa was probably one of the most sort of transformative places I've been, because even from the very first time I was there, I had the sense of the privilege, that I was privileged to be there, that it was a gift to me to be able to be out in the wild with people teaching me about the wild, about the land, about the animals, about all of it. And one of the revelations I had was how small human beings really are in the vast landscape of the world. I mean, we are little dots, and you look at the landscape and you have this vastness with trees and grasses and all this beautiful stuff. And then the wild animals, all variety of wild animals. And it's their kingdom, it's their place. And you're like a visitor, and again, you're small in comparison to them. And I loved the feeling that I was all of a sudden small, and that there was this vastness that I was watching and beginning to understand, to learn about. I came away with this feeling of just a full heart, it was really quite something. And I knew when I left that first time, after that first visit, that I would go back. And I've been back 3 times. pretty much to the same part of Africa, East Africa. Um, but it is very it's very refreshing as a human being to be alleviated of this responsibility that you're the most important thing in the universe. It's very it's a gift again. I mean, it's like to let go of this feeling of you're everything. Because we're part of what everything is. We're not it all ourselves. And in Africa, that's where I kind of had that kind of understanding. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It
It really was like a spiritual kind of revelation, and it was also like when you just fall in love with something. You fall in love with the sense of this is the way things should be. We should be living in this harmonious way with nature and with the animals, and we should not be trying to dominate the animals or to control the landscape. We should be living in harmony with it. And that's what you witness in Africa, or at least the part of Africa where I was. There's this sense of this long-standing sense of understanding of being in harmony with nature, and not fighting it, and honoring it. Yeah, it's quite something.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it's very interesting since I've done more than 100 interviews by now. I've talked with many people about gratitude, and one of the most common things that people do to feel grateful is to reconnect with nature. And I think that's very interesting, especially taking into consideration what you just said, the fact that we feel that we are part of something bigger, and that we are lucky enough to have this home, this place that actually gives us everything that we need one way or another. It's just very fulfilling, and it's a great reminder for us all.
Yeah, I think so. When you asked me a series of questions about what I ways in which I might try to find gratitude, even when it's hard, one of the things I remember writing down in answer to that was that I walk by the ocean. That when I walk by the ocean, because I'm very lucky, I live close to the ocean. I'm here in San Francisco. I have access to the beautiful Pacific Ocean. And when I walk there, I feel again that same sense that I felt in Africa, which is that I'm very small. The ocean is very large and vast and mysterious and compelling. And you can just continue to let yourself be part of that, and you can feel like your nervous system calms down and gets quieter and gets more peaceful, and the whole thing, it's like it's immediate for me when I go by the ocean. It happens, and I remember that happening in Africa, just looking at that vast landscape. It felt that I would become peaceful just being there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I just remember something that I experienced when I was by the seaside at one point. It was at night, and the sky was very clear, and it was like a really large space, so no big buildings or anything else in a very large radius. And I could understand the fact that we are on this planet. Like, I could see the fact that we are on this planet, and we are all here together. And it was so interesting to realize that, because usually we're more focused on the immediate things that we see, and it's not very often that we realize where we are actually, and it was an amazing feeling for me as well.
Yeah, I think it's I'm a practicing Buddhist, and I've been a Buddhist for about 20 some odd years. And one of the main pieces of wisdom that I have taken in from that practice is that I am part of everything else, and yes, I have my own distinct qualities and, contributions, but I'm just part of the family of humans and nature, and that I'm connected to it all. And I think we, in the Western culture, in particular, we live these unrealistic lives of being in our heads a lot of the time,
Yeah.
And we operate off of certain, things that we've learned and ways to become successful and, get the things that we want. But that's all stuff that is manufactured by our brains and not necessarily by our hearts. And the heart is what is closer to nature. The power of the human heart is closer to nature, and that tells the truth more than the brain does. The brain just keeps going and saying, "Oh yes, you want to have a good vacation, so here's where you're going to go for your vacation," or you want to make some money, so here's a good plan that maybe it'll get you some money. I mean, there's all these hoops that the brain gets you to jump through that are sort of unrealistic and don't often get you to happiness. And when you feel your common bond with your communion with your fellow beings, that's when you feel the happiness. And that's also what happens in nature, like we were saying before. It's what happens to our hearts. So the Western people need much more of an infusion of the practices of Buddhism because it's a very wise way of life, really, and it's all about non-harming, and it's about compassion and loving kindness, and it's not about being in your brain. It's not about thinking that your brain has all the answers.
Yeah, I believe that that's so important, and the sad thing is that we usually don't realize it until we have an experience that doesn't have to do something with our brain. Like if it's something that I don't know, that's more emotional or something like this, we realize, oh my God, I was in my head for so much time. And usually many of the problems that we have when in regards to mental health come from this, from being so much in our
Right.
heads, and
Yeah.
not so much in our hearts, and just forgetting that we are not just our minds and our brains, we are much more as human beings. And yeah, I totally believe that. And I also wanted to get to something else that I thought was very interesting, that you wrote about what you do when it's hard to be grateful, that you like to prepare beautiful food.
Right.
I love this. How
Well,
does it work for you?
Well, this will I'll take us back to my book, because in my book, in the beginning, when I'm living in Italy, we have a woman that works for us, works for my parents, and she cooks for us. And she's a peasant woman. She's totally, uneducated and so on. But she is a magician in the kitchen. So I spend a lot of time with her. I'm 11 years old at this point, and I love to eat. I always did like to eat from the time I was even younger. And I would watch her do her preparing, her managing of everything that she was going to produce for us. and I just became captivated. And so I learned all these things from her about how you make the perfect salad dressing, how you make a beautiful mayonnaise, how you find the best chicken at the market, when you go, because I went with her places. So I had this education as a young girl, and it made me totally convinced that the preparing of food is it's another, it's an act of love, and it can be a ritual and a practice that you do that makes you feel good. You get a nice plate, you have a beautiful glass to put whatever you're drinking in. You make it beautiful, and then you prepare the food with love, and it is giving yourself a gift. So when I am sad and when I am, feeling like I'm lacking hope, if I prepare food, I immediately alter the state of my heart. I feel better because I'm giving myself something that's loving.
Exactly.
And all of us humans need to learn how to do that. We need to learn how to love ourselves. That's where it all starts.
That's so true. That's so true. And having been to Italy, I know how much people there can love food, and I've been to some places myself, but I think in Italy people love food the most, and they have like a tradition. It's like it's part of the culture. It's something that's very unique to Italians, and you just fall in love with this, and it's really an amazing experience. And I can imagine how that got you to love this process so much.
Well, I've written a lot about in my journals that I would keep, on all the different trips I went on. Like I say, I kept journals the whole time, and I always wrote about what I was eating wherever I was. You know what I mean? When I was in Vietnam, or when I was, in South America or whatever, I would write about the kind of food I was eating because it was interesting to me, and because food is such a reflection of the culture and the history. I mean, it has to do with the history and the culture of the place, and all the ways that it's prepared, and the tools that are used, and the way it is. And in Japan, which of course has very, very powerful ritual around food, it's an art form in a way, and so I always wanted to record that as I was going along on my journeys, because I thought there was a lot to be said about a people who make food a certain way, and then you can incorporate that in your own life if you're so motivated. You can figure out how to prepare different kinds of food. You have to be interested in eating, of course.
I tend to believe that many of our listeners are. So if they appreciate many of the things that they enjoy in their life, that they have in their life, usually one of those things are eating and good food. So I'm guessing that people resonate with this because I am that kind of person. So probably it's the right people to talk about these kinds of things. But since we're nearing the end of our time together, I wanted to ask you, firstly, what does gratitude mean for you personally?
Well, it's a very rich topic. To me, I associate gratitude with certain people in my life. As I said in a written answer to you, I also see gratitude as sort of conveying the sense that we're all connected, like we've talked about a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. We are part of a larger human family, and that's something to be grateful for. That's something to feel thankful for. We have a common humanity, and in that common humanity, there is great beauty, there's great kindness, there are gifts everywhere. And so we're not just alone floating through life, we're part of this larger thing. And that just makes me, sometimes when I feel sad, I think about sharing suffering and sharing joy with all kinds of people I don't even know. So gratitude means that to me. But it also, gratitude means my family. It means the mother that brought me into the world, that even didn't know how to take care of me, but she gave me life, My grandmother who tended me, who looked after me as a sort of what we call a fairy godmother person, Gratitude absolutely is associated with this woman who showed me love in a way that nobody else in my life did. And gratitude is also my own family that I created, that myself, my daughters and my grandchildren. When I think about the fact that I have this family, I'm filled with this thankfulness that I did this. And it wasn't easy to raise children when I did. I was very young and I didn't know what I was doing. But boy, am I glad I did. And so it's that and the friendships I have and all the goodwill that seems to have generated. And then, last but not least, the fact that I had the tenacity and the courage to create this book that I had wanted for so long to write and was so scared of doing. And I gathered my wits about me and I got some support and I spent several years doing it and I produced a beautiful book. And when I think of that, I'm sort of filled with this really grateful feeling, like, oh my God, I did this. And this is an articulation of things I've learned and the quality of my life and things that could touch any number of people, So that's another thing that seems to emanate gratitude for me.
Amazing.
And there's other things too, but I could go on with a long list, but we probably would run out of time. I could talk about classical music and food and art and my Buddhist practice, which is has given me a great amount of wisdom and sanity in my life.
Amazing. But I'm guessing that a lot of that is in the book, right?
Oh, a lot of it is, yes. Very much, yeah. The book is really about finding oneself in the world, like traveling the world, but ultimately discovering who you are and discovering love for yourself and discovering love of others and forgiving the people that have hurt you. And, it's all about discovery and becoming a larger person, I think.
Beautiful. And where can our audience find you? Where can they get in touch with you and get your book?
Well, I have a website, which is a very beautiful website, if I say so myself. I had a lot of help making it. So the website is magdimond.com, and that's spelled Magdimond. And on my website, I have a blog, I have news about the book, I have photographs, I have many fun things to see. I've also created a site where I'm giving away a meditation tape that I made, and it's a loving kindness meditation. And that website is bowingtoelephants.com. traveljunkieperu.com/gift. So people can go there and they can actually acquire a 10-minute loving kindness meditation and then join my mailing list and become part of my community. So that's another way they can find me. I'm on Facebook, of course, facebook.com/travelswithmeg. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all that sort of thing, but those things are, I think my website and my meditation tape site are the more important ways to connect with me. And in terms of buying my book, there's always Amazon, which everybody in the world seems to know about. It's a good way to buy the book, inexpensive. And but also I tell people to go to their independent bookstores. Certainly, I like to support the independent stores because they're becoming fewer and fewer now, and it's kind of sad. So that's the way to get to actually buy the book. But I urge people to look at the website because it tells a great deal about me and about my sort of vision, and it also tells a great deal about the book.
Yeah, and I love the picture on the book. It tells a really beautiful story, and I'm sure that our listeners will be very curious about it. I will be putting the links in the description. And in the end of our time together, I wanted to thank you very much for taking this time to have this chat and and for sharing so many amazing pieces of wisdom.
Well, I'm so grateful talking about gratitude for you doing what you're doing and allowing people to speak their truth. I think that ultimately that's what's most important in a human life, is that we get to speak our truth. Well, Georgian, thank you so much for your attention and pointing the way to the book and to the gifts of gratitude.
Hey, Gratitude Seeker, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview. I really appreciate it. And if you could think of one person that would also benefit from it, share it with them. It might actually be the inspiration that they need to make their day or maybe even their life much better. Thank you so much once again. This has been Georgian Benta. Don't forget to keep seeking and spreading gratitude.